Hey everybody, I'm Homer Hickam. I'm making this audio video at the time of the great coronavirus episode in all our lives, where a lot of us have had to be sequestered, shall we say, at home, not able to get out very much, and probably trying to figure out some things to do, maybe being a little bit worried and some such. So, to try to help out, I thought maybe what I would do would be to read from one of my books that might be amusing. I thought about, of course, Rocket Boys, the um, ever favorite Rocket Boys, also known as October Sky. This is the Spanish version, Cielo de Octubre, but you get the drift. Or maybe Sky of Stone, the sequel to Rocket Boys. But in the end, I decided probably the best thing that I could do would be to read from my latest, which is somewhat amusing, called Carrying Albert Home. Now, to give you a little background on Carrying Albert Home, where we are, the chapter I've decided to read, or the part, is the one that's titled How Elsie Came to Love the Beach and Homer and Albert Joined the Coast Guard, during which Elsie discovers where she truly belongs and Homer and Albert fight a terrible and bloody battle against smugglers and other riffraff of the sea. Now, background up to this point, Albert, the titular character of Carrying Albert Home, is an alligator. And actually, I've got Albert here today who's going to help me read. Stop it out. Stop. Okay. All right. Going back or I'm going to put you up. Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah. So Albert is an alligator about that size that belonged to my mother. Given to her as a wedding gift by her former boyfriend, whose name was Buddy Ebsen. Buddy, as you may remember, was Uncle Jed in the Beverly Hillbillies, the TV show, or you may not remember it if you were born after a certain time. But if you were really born even earlier, he was Georgie Russell in the Davy Crockett series with Walt Disney. By the way, this eye here, let's see, both of them are a little bit red. I just had cataract surgery, so I'm really, really working for you folks. Anyway, so Homer and Elsie are my parents, Homer Hickam Sr. and Elsie, and the year that Carrying Albert Home takes place is 1935. It was 8 years before I was born. This novel consists of stories that my parents told me over time. Anyway, my dad was very jealous. My future dad was very jealous over Albert, the alligator that Buddy sent to my mom in Colwood, West Virginia, where they were living at that time. And he insisted that it was either him or that alligator. So after giving it some thought overnight, Mom said, okay, but we have to carry Albert home, which meant back to Florida. She had an ulterior motive for that because that meant that Dad had to leave his job at the mine and carry her and Albert all the way back to Florida. All along the way, they had lots of adventures. They were joined for no apparent reason by a rooster who has no name in this book. And before I get to the point where Elsie falls in love with the beach, a number of things have happened. By the way, I'm using this is the large print version of Carrying Albert Home, so that I can read it even with my cataracted eyes, and uncataracted eyes, I should say. And so what has occurred up to this point is that Homer and Elsie are in my dad's old 1929 Buick, and in the back seat is a wash tub that has Albert in it and also the unnamed rooster. And they have traveled and already had a couple of adventures. One of them where Elsie became a communist, met John Steinbeck, broke up a union strike against a fiber mill, and and then moved on from there, where my dad became a semi-pro baseball player, and Elsie became a nurse. She became a nurse to a very rich man who left her a lot of money, but the rich man's wife, for no apparent reason, stole it back from my mom, and they got chased out of town. So their next stop was in South Carolina, and that will be where our story picks up. And so let me go find that, where, let's see, how Elsie became a radical and a communist. Yes, we crossed that. And they ended up in South Carolina. Oh, also in between, Elsie became a bootlegger and ran the Thunder Road with one of the first, what would eventually become NASCAR drivers. So for those of you that are interested in that, you might like to read that part. So I am closing in on that chapter, and here we are. So it's called How Elsie Came to Love the Beach and Homer and Albert Joined the Coast Guard. And I will read this chapter by chapter, and I'll break all this up into the segments by chapters. Not that long. Okay, this is actually chapter 28. Captain Oscar's boarding house, which sat beside an ocean sound, was surrounded by pin oaks dripping with Spanish moss. It was a lovely old manse built of cedar planks, weathered gray, with a roof covered with some shingles, and a front porch boasting a swing and a dozen rocking chairs. This is not going to be perfect. I'm reading this for the first time in a long time, so stick with me. By the way, the phone might ring, cats might meow, wives might talk, any number of things that might happen in the usual Hickam household might occur, but hopefully it'll still be fun for you to hear. All right. The front yard consisted of sand, sawgrass, and sea oats, and abutted a well-maintained wooden dock with iron cleats for the one boat that was most often moored there, a fishing trawler named the Dorothy Howard. By the way, Dorothy Howard is a real person. She's the wife of the wonderful cartoonist and caricaturist Don Howard, who we know very well and are a really good friend. So I just thought, I'll name a boat after Dorothy. That's what novelists get to do. We get to do things like that. The Dorothy, as she was affectionately known, was a working boat and fair sailor, although not one you'd want to broach up too far in a steep sea and stiff wind. Captain Bob, her skipper, knew all her idiosyncrasies and tricks and treated her like he would treat a generous great aunt, which is to say, with deference and respect. How did he hurt himself? Oops, skipped over a page. The boarding house required help, and a sign to that effect greeted Elsie in the morning of her arrival. She straightened her shoulders, fluffed up her hair, smoothed her skirt, and knocked on the door. A man dressed in formal clothing of a sea captain, that is to say a navy blue coat, matching pants, and a white brown hat, came to the door. By the way, if you really want a professional reading of this, there is an audiobook version of this, which is done by a professional reader. Also, you can go out on Kindle right now and download the whole daggone book, or whatever you want to do. Anyway, I'm going to put my glasses on. It might help. Elsie pointed at the sign. Whatever you might need, she said, I can provide if the pay is suitable. The man leaned on his cane and stumped out on the porch, there to observe the Buick. Homer was resting, his eyes closed on the passenger side, and Albert was looking with eager interest through the open window on the same side. The rooster stood on the alligator's head. Quite a menagerie you got there. It is, sir, and I'm responsible for the lot. My husband's hand is crushed and his wrist is broken, but he's not applying for this job. I am. Why do you have an alligator? We hail from the West Virginia coal fields, an unsuitable place for an alligator, or anyone for that matter. I am therefore carrying him home to Florida. He was a gift to me from Buddy Ebsen of Orlando, the movie actor and dancer. I saw a movie once in Chicago, the man said wistfully. It was silent, although there was a piano player on the stage. He approached the Buick and inspected Homer. He is sweating and his face is pale. I think he is very sick. His hand is infected, Elsie explained. I know that because I was once a nurse. The man yelled, "Hey, Bob, get up here!" And a bearded young man dressed in working khakis and a woman's cap walked up, and a seaman's cap walked up from the dock. "Fetch us the sawbones, Bob, and toot sweet, you hear? This young man may be dying." "Who do we have here, Pops?" "Never mind that now. Take Wilma and be off with you." Bob tipped his hat to Elsie, went into a shed, and came back out riding a brown mare. He proceeded to clip-clop up the road Elsie had blundered down the night before. "That's Captain Bob, my son," the man said. "I shall introduce you to him at length. But first things first. I am Captain Oscar, the owner of this establishment. Now let's see to your husband." Elsie and Captain Oscar helped Homer inside and laid him on the couch in the parlor. "Tell me how you feel, Homer," Elsie said in a cold voice. She felt no sympathy toward him, only responsibility. This was because Homer had driven Elsie away from her fortune, which had already been taken away from her, but she was not one to forgive such things. Homer didn't reply. He didn't even moan. He only looked at her with glassy, uncomprehending eyes. "How did he hurt himself?" Captain Oscar asked. "He was struck with a baseball bat," Elsie answered, "and life. They don't always go together, but this time they did." An hour later, the doctor arrived in a chuggy old Ford and went inside to see his patient. After his examination, he asked, "Who speaks for this man?" "I do, sir," Elsie said. "He is my husband." "His hand and wrist are terribly infected, and the infection has reached into his arm. If there is no improvement by tomorrow, I will have to take it off." The doctor handed her a bottle. "These are aspirin. Every 3 hours, give him 2. They will lower his temperature. The infection he'll have to fight off on his own." "He is a coal miner," Elsie said, her pride overcoming for the moment her anger, and therefore strong. "Bacteria has a way of taking down the strongest of men," the doctor said as he strapped his black bag shut. "But on the morrow we shall see what we shall see." Homer was moved to a downstairs bedroom, the second on the left, and then Captain Oscar, who was one of those men of indeterminate age who might be anywhere between 70 and 90, bade Elsie sit with him in the parlor for a while. "You wish for a job," he said. "I have an opening. It's a maid's job." "I can be a maid," Elsie said. "I have always wanted to be a maid." "And it's a cook's job." "I can be a cook," Elsie said. "I have always wanted to be a cook." "And it is a manager's job." He waved his hand to indicate the dusty parlor and its somewhat mildewed furniture. "My wife ran this place until she died, and then my daughter Grace took over until she came down with the tuberculosis. Now it has fallen into the general state of disrepair you presently observe. Would you be willing to be the maid, the cook, and the manager of my boarding house? I cannot pay you other than room and board until we become more prosperous, but then I will give you a percentage of the net to be negotiated later. What do you say?" "I have always wanted to be the manager of a boarding house," Elsie swore and stuck out her hand. Captain Oscar shook her hand, and Elsie became the maid, cook, and manager of Captain Oscar's boarding house, an establishment dedicated to clean rooms, and fine food, especially if it was fish. The next day, the doctor returned as promised and examined Homer's arm. Homer continued to be generally unresponsive, although when the doctor ran his hand up and down his arm, he flinched. "The arm has not improved," the doctor announced. "I shall have to cut it off." "You shall do no such thing," Elsie declared, then transitioned into a nursery description of what she had observed the night before, while, out of a sense of responsibility, she had tended to her husband, even though she could scarcely stand the sight of him. "Although his arm has not improved much, it has improved some. I can tell by a subtle color change that may not be apparent to you. I didn't rest at all last night. I gave my husband his aspirin, but also kept him cool by dipping a towel in ice water and placing it across his brow, a procedure I'm surprised you didn't prescribe." "It did not occur to me that you had ice," the doctor said. "I found some in the ice box where the fish is kept fresh. Now, I think what should be done is that you remove the cast, which has become nasty and is too tight, and put a clean one on, and also a bit looser." The doctor was affronted. Not a professional. All right. Sorry for coughing into my hand, but I'm all by myself. I promise that I will clean it later. The doctor was affronted. Madam, I am a graduate of a state-approved medical school and have years of experience. I assure you that if I don't amputate your husband's arm, he will be dead within a couple of days. He will keep his arm, Elsie said resolutely, and if he is dead as a result, I will admit that you were right. The doctor regarded Elsie, his frown changing to an expression of consternation. You are a pig-headed child, he said, who is gambling with this man's life. He is my husband, Elsie replied, and if a wife can't gamble with her husband's life, then what's the marriage for? You have an interesting take on marriage, the doctor replied, but then opened his black bag and removed the saw and a little sack of plaster. I shall give him a new cast as you wish. And I will help you, Elsie said. You see, I have training as a nurse. Afterward, as the doctor put his saw and the empty plaster sack back into his black bag, he said, Pray that he is stronger than I perceive. I will not return unless sent for. I doubt that will be necessary, Elsie replied. The doctor's face was pinched. Then good day to you, madam. Over the next few days, Elsie plied Homer with the occasional aspirin and kept him cool by wiping him down with ice water every hour. After the fish ice ran out, she drove the Buick 5 miles up the road to the ice house and bought more on Captain Oscar's credit. Captain Oscar was impressed by her constant attention. You must love your husband very much, he said, while holding a kerosene lantern aloft in the middle of the night to assist her in her ministrations. I could have saved my brother Victor if I'd brought ice to him, Elsie said while wiping Homer down. A fever will not catch me unawares again. If this man was the worst villain in the world, Captain, I would do no less. It took 2 days, but finally came a break in Homer's fever. The swelling in his arm and wrist and hand receded, and the angry red streaks dissolved. While Elsie was standing, tending to him, he blinked once and stared at her. Hello, Elsie, he said. I'm pretty cold. Hello, Homer, Elsie replied. You had a fever, but I've saved you with the application of ice. She dipped a towel in the pan of ice water and raised it up so Homer could see. You still couldn't have saved Victor, he said. So you say, she answered, and turned his face to the window and its view of the sandy road lined by pin oaks. Look how lovely this place is. I brought you here. Where are we? In South Carolina along the coast. We are off course, Homer said. I am now plotting our course. You have abrogated that responsibility. Homer raised his ruined hand and wiggled his fingers. It works, he said, but not well. It will get better, Elsie said, and that's all you have to do for now. Get yourself better. In the meantime, I will provide. He gazed at her. You seem angry. I am angry. I will forever be angry. You said I did not deserve the money I earned. You did not back me up when I needed you. Homer frowned as if trying to recall, then said, But that's the way I felt. Elsie dumped the pan of ice water on Homer's lap. And this is how I feel. Elsie left Homer with his mouth open to object or ask more questions, she didn't care which, and got busy cleaning the boarding house from top to bottom. When she arrived with her mop, bucket, and broom at the second upstairs room on the right, she was surprised to find within it a young woman seated in a wingback chair facing the window that overlooked the Sound, which Elsie had learned the low country folk called a swash. Oh, sorry, Elsie said. I didn't know we had a guest. The woman, who wore a high-necked white blouse, a brocaded skirt, and lace black boots, turned her face from the swash. I am not a guest. I am Grace, Captain Oscar's daughter, and you are Elsie, our new maid, cook, and manager. Elsie had forgotten that Captain Oscar had mentioned his sick daughter. She had presumed the daughter was off in a sanitarium. If you would like me to come back later, she began. No, please come in, Grace said, a faint smile forming on her sunken cheek face as she nodded toward the implements that Elsie was holding. That mop, bucket, and broom were mine before I caught the consumption. The consumption? Elsie asked. Tuberculosis. I laughingly refer to it as my Victorian novel's disease. You laugh about it. Isn't it bad? Grace shrugged, her thin shoulders barely moving beneath her blouse. I laugh to keep from crying. It's bad enough to send me to this room, here to contemplate all that might have been. I'm certain my future would have included a handsome husband, intelligent and lively children, and a long romantic life beside the sea. I'm sure all those things will be yours, Elsie said. The woman coughed a phlegmy cough and shook her head. My fate was preordained. I can see that now, and perhaps, she said after a moment's reflection, it was so that your fate might be fulfilled. Who are we mere mortals to know the plans of the angels who control our lives? No one, Elsie answered. My husband is also very ill. Yes, I know, Grace answered. I slipped downstairs to observe him. He appears strong, and I believe he will return to health. She turned businesslike. So tell me, Elsie, what experience do you bring me and my father? None whatsoever, Elsie confessed, but I am eager to learn. Grace smiled. Why do you think he hired you? He said I was the only one who applied for the job. There is truth to that observation, Grace observed, but I suppose it was also because the turn of your pretty ankle caught his ancient but still appreciative eye. But never mind, I think he made a good choice. The first thing you should do is delve into the top right drawer of the roll-top desk in the kitchen. There you will find the daily log I kept during my years of managership. It will tell you how I did things. Read it and then come back to me, and I shall answer any and all questions. I'm sure I will have many, Elsie said. I hope I won't be a bother. Never. In fact, I take great comfort in you. You are the answer to my father's prayers and mine. You will find no more ardent worker than me, Elsie swore. You must make certain every occupied room has fresh sheets each day. I've already found your scrub board, wash tub, and clothesline, and I will make it just so. Fresh flowers in every room, every day. I will range far and wide to find them. The kitchen is in dire need of a good scrub, and the icebox is empty. I shall scrub the kitchen, and given money, will fill the icebox with ice and fresh vegetables and as good and clean meat as I can find. Splendid. Along the road you will find farmers offering their produce and meats, both fresh and salted. My brother Captain Bob will provide plenty of fish. Can you cook? Unfortunately, I am only fair in that department. There are recipes aplenty in the cupboard over the kitchen sink. Use them diligently. They shall be my guide. There is something else, Grace said. There is a child. Her name is Rose. She lives a little northward on the Sound. I would have you hire her. Tell her you will pay her in food. She is very smart and knows where everything in the inlet is and who you might need to see for this and that. As soon as possible, I will go to her, Elsie vowed. After a few more days of cleaning, and once everything had been put away in its proper place, Elsie felt she could take the time to find and hire the girl named Rose. She walked along the muddy edges of the Sound northward until she came upon a weathered, wind-blown old house made of driftwood and scrap. It was there she found a girl not more than 10 years old, sitting on the porch as if waiting for her to arrive. Good day, missus, the girl said, swinging her bare legs. My name is Rose. I know what your name is, Rose. Would you like to work for me at Captain Oscar's? I would pay you in food. Rose cocked her head. I heard you have an alligator. Is it true? Yes, it is. Might I touch him? Of course. You may even feed him if you like. Then I will work for you. Rose gathered up her things, her very few things, and walked with Elsie to Captain Oscar's. Without being told, she made her bed in an outbuilding that had once been a shed for goats. Then, also without being told, she washed all the windows and scrubbed all the copper pots and pans in the kitchen until they gleamed like new pennies. After that, she went to Elsie, who was on her hands and knees scrubbing the parlor floor. Might I touch Albert now? Elsie put her fist in her back and stretched, then wordlessly took the girl in to see Albert, who was in the washtub on the screened back porch. The rooster was asleep on his head, but woke up and jumped off when Elsie and Rose walked in. Albert grinned and grunted a hello as Elsie knelt beside him and petted his head. Albert, I would like you to meet someone. Her name is Rose. She is a hard-working child. You should allow her to touch you. At Elsie's nod, Rose went down on her knees and with a trembling hand reached out to touch the alligator's knobby head. At her touch, Albert's eyes rolled back. I think he likes me, Rose breathed. Albert is a very sensible boy, Elsie said, who becomes a friend when he knows one. I will be your friend, Albert, Rose said, forever and ever. That is a long time, Elsie mused. Time is the best gift, Mrs., Rose replied. Time is really the only gift we receive from God that we can give to others. The mention of God took Elsie aback. She had been raised attending the company churches of the coal camps where her father had worked, but the thought that God gave out gifts like time was a novel one, never covered by dogma or the preachers she had listened to. I was told you're very smart, Rose, and it seems you are. Thank you, Miss Elsie. It pleases me that you might think so. Rose, besides being a hard worker, proved to be good company. She taught Elsie things such as how to catch blue crabs with nothing more than an old fish head, a string, and a long-handled net, and then how to cook and clean them. She was also fearless, and in that respect reminded Elsie of herself. Rose had been working for Elsie less than a week when a huge dog presented itself in the yard. When Elsie came out on the porch and saw that it had foam dripping from its mouth, and its eyes were busy with hate, she called for the girl. It is surely rabid, Elsie said when Rose arrived. It will not leave before it has bitten someone. Rose studied the creature. I know that dog, she said. It's old Sandy. Belongs to the Buford family. They never fed it much, so it had to go into the woods to feed itself. Must have been bit by a sick raccoon. If we move it, it will attack us, Elsie said. I shouldn't have called you and put you in the same pickle. Oh, yes, ma'am, you should have, Rose declared. But now we must work together. Do you see that spade leaning against the fence? I used it to work in the garden this morning. I must get to it, and then I can do what must be done. You must distract old Sandy without getting bit. Elsie considered where she was in relation to the dog. I will do my best, she said. But do you mean to hit the dog with the spade? This isn't Sandy, Rose explained. Sandy is already died. I know you're right, but it's still got to be hard. Hard or not, it must be done. Elsie exhaled. All right, I accept your premise. Ready? Rose nodded and Elsie stamped on the porch. Sandy, Sandy, here, come get me. The dog shook its head, a wisp of foamy drool slinging from its mouth, and then came running toward Elsie in a strange, half-crippled gait. It stumbled at the steps, but kept coming after regaining its footing. Elsie jumped up on the porch banister and bounced there as Rose leaped over the banister, plucked up the shovel, and sprinted back to the porch and brained the dog with one sure swing, the blade of the shovel making a sickening sound as it crushed the dog's skull. Rose tossed the shovel away and knelt beside the dog. Poor Sandy, she said, her hand hovering over its bloody head. Don't touch it, Elsie said as she stepped down from the porch. It can still give you its disease even when dead. It led a poor life, Rose said, but it lived until it died, and until this moment never tried to hurt us all. Rose looked up at the sky. Bless this old dog, Lord, and let him finally get a good meal in heaven today. Do you think dogs go to heaven? Elsie asked. If they don't, Rose said, God is a poor excuse for a God. Elsie looked at Rose. You saved me. One might say I saved us, Rose responded. Or more appropriately, we saved each other. It's what friends do. Elsie reached across the dead dog and touched Rose's cheek and her hair. Thank you, she said. Rose also took Elsie to the seashore, where she'd never been before. They walked around the sound, then through a shallow inlet to reach the Atlantic coast. In every direction, the sea appeared endless. Elsie was enthralled by the wind, the waves, the thunderous noise, and the way the sand felt between her toes. They call this the Grand Strand, Rose reported. It is aptly named, Elsie replied. I have never imagined a beach so grand. Rose pointed at the flat, round shells that littered the beach. Those are sand dollars, missus, she said. She picked one up and broke it open to reveal what looked like tiny sculptured birds of fine white china. Why are they in there, where no one can see them? Elsie asked. Nobody knows, Rose said, except as a hidden glory of God. It makes you wonder what other glories he keeps hidden. You have spoken of God before, Elsie said. What do you know about him? I have never set foot in a church, Rose answered, but somebody must have made all this. A sensible answer, Elsie said, her admiration for the child growing. Rose pointed out the gray driftwood, twisted like gargoyles and shoved back along the dunes. The sailors say those are formed by mermaids. Maybe they do, and maybe they also sculpt the sand dollars too. Elsie picked up what she thought was a black arrowhead. Her brothers were always bringing arrowheads home from the hikes in the surrounding mountains, but this one was a bit strange. What is this, Rose? She asked. Why, it's a shark's tooth, Mrs. Rose replied. Elsie studied the tooth, noting how the fine serrations along the edge, like those of a butcher's bone knife. She worried it between her fingers, its smooth surface soothing to the touch. But why is it black? She asked. I'm sure I don't know, Rose answered. I've seen the fishing boats bring in a shark now and again, and their teeth are always white as ivory. Maybe black teeth are very old, Elsie proposed, like dinosaurs. Things usually bust up in the sea when they're old, Rose scoffed, then bent down and picked up something blue and sparkling in the surf, like this piece of beach glass. Elsie took the glass. It was smooth and rounded on its edges and glittered in the sun like a jewel. It's beautiful, she said. It's just a piece from an old bottle, Rose replied. It's been tumbled in the sand by the sea for a long time. You can keep it. Elsie put the beach glass and the tooth in her pocket. Thank you, Rose. Rose shrugged, then pointed at a large shell just at the ocean's edge. Look there, it's a queen conch, a true beauty. Elsie followed Rose to the big shell, all turned into itself, pink and white and smooth. Elsie picked it up and held it to her ear. I thought I could hear the ocean in this kind of shell, but I don't hear anything. That's because its animal still lives in it, Rose said, taking the shell and showing Elsie the hard gray foot of the sea creature within. It will soon die here in the open air and the sun. Then let's return it to the sea, Elsie proposed. She took the shell and waded into the water, past the first row of waves where she dropped the shell. There, she said, walking out. Rose said, Oh, Mrs., you are very bold. There are sharks in the surf this time of the year. Fortune favors the bold, Rose, Elsie replied, although she was shaken by the belated warning. There was so much about the sea she didn't know, including its dangers. Still, for a reason she couldn't discern, Elsie wanted to tempt the sea just to see what it would do. Rose led Elsie farther down the beach. With every stop, there seemed to be another wonder. An egg of a manta ray looking for all the world like a lady's purse. A shell that was the shape and color of an exotic butterfly wing. Little birds that scampered along the surf but never got their feet wet. Sandpipers, Mrs., Rose explained. Elsie also gasped at the strange creatures just beneath the shallows with bulbous heads that flew more than swam. Horseshoe crabs, came Rose's explanation, and the air itself, which was clean and fresh, yet smelled of a vast underwater kingdom. I have never been happier, Elsie said, as much to herself as to Rose. It was the sea, the glorious sea. Here beside it, near it, in it, was where she felt she belonged. I should like to stay here forever and ever and ever and learn everything there is to learn, Elsie said. There is no reason why you can't, Rose replied. Oh, there is, Elsie said. It seems any time I am close to happiness, it is snatched away from me. How about you, Rose? Are you happy? Moderately so, although I am an orphan, Rose replied. Happiness will not be fully mine until I find a family. They walked on for a while, Elsie mulling over Rose's declaration. Finally she said, If I knew my own fate, I would be pleased to make you part of my family. Although I have a husband now, I am certain I will always have some sort of family. You see... Oh, Mrs., don't say it, Rose cried. He is getting better. I go into his room to look at him now and again, and I'm certain his health is returning. It is not his health that will see us apart, Elsie replied. It is who he is and who I am. Rose looked away to a line of sea and sky. Look there, she said suddenly. Porpoises! See their bottle-shaped noses and the smiles on their faces? They are good and wonderful creatures that have saved many drowning sailors. They're also supposed to be good luck. Elsie watched the cavorting animals, but she took no joy from them. Instead, a great sadness washed over her. The world was indeed beautiful, but she still had many decisions to make. End of chapter.